Why do prices never go down? Ah!
What possible reason could there be for the US government to intentionally make prices constantly go up?
Stick around to the end for frugal tips and life hacks.
How could the price of a cheeseburger lead to an hour and a half long discussion about housing and homelessness?
Sick diving. Legendary frozen love. Casey roasted. Visualizing season 6 of Kitchen Sick, microscopy.
All right, welcome to yet another kitchen sink microscopy. I am Eric Rosenblatt. I have a E for Eric. Um, and we'd love it if you'd like and share this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave some comments down there. Keep the conversation going. That's what we're all about.
And I am Count Casey. Eric is one host. I am two hosts. And we also write music. And that's at the end of the episode. You'll have to count for yourself how many minutes that is. Okay. So what are we talking about today?
Well, we just covered a particular kind of related topic on a Lightning Strikes Twice. And we had a note to talk about another thing that's kind of related to this. And I'm thinking, like, why don't we talk about the current state of economic affairs, and not just in the US, but because this is actually kind of global.
It is, yeah.
But obviously, from my perspective, that's what I see is
right,
the stuff in the US, and you see things from Germany. So
yeah, this is actually like a great topic to flex our multi-country points of view here. And yeah, just like kind of in my opinion, the general global economy has kind of a deep-seated rot that we can't really seem to fix, and it's just growing kind of exponentially. And as some of what kind of started this was, I think last week we were chatting for some reason about the price of an ultimate cheeseburger at Jack in the Box, and just looked at how quickly the price of fast food went up, and kind of became like, I forget what statistic you had heard, but there's like a bunch of people that consider that like a luxury now.
Like, I think 48% of people polled said that fast food is a luxury.
We're not that old, and we remember McDonald's having 29-cent cheeseburgers, and now
that was a special, but they at least had a dollar menu, and you could find things under. I remember when you could go to Taco Bell and you get a taco for 79 cents. Now they're like $3 or something.
There's nothing for under $1.
No, maybe like a kid's fry or something. Maybe,
I don't know. Yeah,
it's pretty wild. And what makes me so confused is that, like, they've added a ton of automation to fast food stuff. It isn't as attention. You don't require as much attention as you used to. Things kind of sped up the process quite a bit, and even then, the cost is still high and increasing. And you could probably account for some of that with government actions like increasing minimum wage, but there's other factors too. I think some of it has to do with the price of property going up. And so places that are leasing a location have to pay more. And if they own it, they pay more in property tax. Obviously, the cost of goods has gone up. Even from the source, it's gone up substantially.
Well,
And I mean, there's so
but
many different factors.
that's a chicken and the egg argument, because when you also look at, like the pandemic kind of was a huge economic hit,
Mm-hmm.
or so we think, from down here. But when you look at the profit margins of all these giant, umbrella corporations and stuff, they all skyrocketed. You
Well,
know,
is that now? Is that would that be in absolute terms or relative terms? Like, is it just simply dollars, or is it as a percentage accounting for inflation? Because we've there is definitely inflation going on. Don't like it whatever the
right?
official number is way lower than what the real number is, and we all know it. I
Yeah,
mean,
and
it
and
isn't just
that's
fast food that's gone up. It's literally everything. Everything has gone up.
yeah, and that is the problem. That's what's creating the inflation. The inflation wouldn't really exist if it weren't for all of this, like, money grubbing bullshit. Like, oh, the price of that went up. I've got to jack all my prices up by, like, the exact same percentage that is, which, like, the math does not work out at all to justify that in a fair way. And then boom, you're impacting all of your customers. Butterfly effect, chain reactions. Like, if you do that with every single business, and we see exactly what's happening now. Like,
Well,
there are
okay,
massive explosions going on all over with, like, these chain reactions, creating prices going up, going up, going up. And, like, wages don't really go up. And then when they do, everyone's like, well, no, we got to raise our prices because
well,
we have to pay more
wages
money.
wages trail costs as things currently go by 5 to 10 years ish. So it is slower to catch up. But here's the thing: if it were just simply people, somehow every single company on planet Earth is colluding together to uh, get extra money out of the customers, well, then why isn't there? All it would take is one person, one company to come in and be like, hey, I'm not going to get as much profit, but I'm totally going to undercut this company or that company and get all the customers. Like, why isn't there a fast food chain that
Right?
pops onto the scene and they're like, we've got dollar cheeseburgers?
That's what
Why
I'm
is that?
saying.
Well, but there would be a huge amount of money because yeah, maybe you're not making as much profit per burger, but overall, if you get like 75% of every other fast food chain's customers, well, now
Yeah.
you're making more profit than they are. So why is that
Yeah.
not happening?
Yeah.
You know,
It's not a conspiracy. It's just individual greed, and that's just how it manifests. When you have the ability to take money real easily, it's very, very very easy to just kind of shed ethics and morals when it comes to, like, you know fair treatment for your fellow humans. And that's, I think, a lot of what we see happening. Like, corporations are a stupid thing. Like, they're treated like human beings. Like, they just get this king treatment for no good reason. No good reason.
well, they're a
They're not
construct.
actually better for the economy.
No. Well, they're a
Um,
construct of the government.
yeah,
Corporations are not something that people privately create. It's something you apply for, and you get essentially a license to operate as a corporation.
with
So,
all these protections against, like,
well,
backlash for screwing people
actually,
over.
this is a pretty good example of that. Like, yeah, sure, the individuals responsible for some of the Enron stuff did get arrested, but that is the exception. Most of the time,
Yeah.
like, okay, if a corporation is a person, can you send a corporation to prison?
No.
No, you can't. So it's kind of a bogus concept, honestly.
Hmm.
Like, it's treated as a person in some ways and not in others. Which, to me, okay, well, then what if we treated actual human beings that way? Like, well, you're a human being when you do these things, but when you do those things, you're not a human being anymore. Now you're just a like a number or something. I don't
Yeah.
know. Um, but man, there's so many things. So
Well, I
this
think this
touches.
opens the door to talk about homelessness too, because
Well,
that's
it does. I think we haven't really completely fleshed things out because I mean, I do agree that, well, okay, everybody's greedy. So, of course, a corporation composed of people is going to be greedy. That's just the nature of humans and human interaction. And certainly that is part of something. Um, but there's other factors at play. Economies are very complex systems. Um, Although when you look down at individual facets, they're actually quite simple. But then the way the interplay between those facets is what makes it complex. And that it may seem like the A is connected to B, but actually there's things interconnected in between and things, tertiary things connected to that affect these things. And so it's like, it isn't a simple thing like, oh yeah, prices are high because people are greedy. There's more going on. And inflation, I mean, well, we don't need to necessarily explain that, but certainly that is a factor too, which isn't necessarily it's not caused by just I don't know, suddenly people decide during the course of time, they're just like, oh, in this moment in time everybody's going to start charging more. That makes no sense.
uh, I mean,
Well,
that's
because
kind of what happens. I mean, that is exactly what happens. Like it,
but look at what preceded it. A outrageous amount of money flooding the economies of the world that didn't exist before. So there's that, and of course lots of other things that affected that too. Because the thing is, like, I used to be able to order stuff, let's say 5 years ago, 10 years ago, or something from China, and it was like 50 cents for one thing. And I go and look at it now, and it's $3. So what? Like every single company on the whole face of the planet is just suddenly deciding to charge more money all at this one magical time. It doesn't make
this
sense.
actually is a thing, though. I mean, like even when we ran a business, we 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 tried to be fair in pricing,
Mhm.
and we actually found that we started getting more customers when we raised our price because we were way undercutting everybody else. So we exuded this kind of lower scum of the earth sort of,
Okay, no, you're
you know,
you're 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 right in that. In
and there's absolutely no merit behind that. It's just
well,
like judging a book by its cover. But
there kind of is a little bit in that, like, it's the optics of a service. If you go to you see a barber right here, and the barber's charging $20 for a haircut, and across the street is a barber charging $2 for a haircut, you're going to be like, well, I'm pretty sure that $20 haircut's going to be a lot better than that $2 one. There's no way that can be that good for that cheap. And
yeah,
so the people just, I mean, it's a natural tendency that you think, well, if it costs more, then it's probably better.
take gasoline. Like there's absolutely no reason why the gasoline on this corner versus that corner shouldn't be like in some kind of bidding war where like tomorrow they've got 15 cents cheaper gas than this guy over here. And it's like, well, that doesn't mean it's crappier gas. Of
No.
course, they're just playing with the cushion of their profit and trying to find that sweet spot where like they make more money in the end because more people come there for gas.
Yeah.
And that's not really happening. It's more just like, oh, their prices went up, man, let's bring ours up too because we
Well,
can. And it's kind of lazy economics,
they
really.
do, but it's only by pennies generally.
Right, that's what I'm saying. But like, like the $20 versus $2 is an extreme on one end, but the extreme going on right now is like we're a whole 2 cents cheaper, or like pay for the year and get like 1 day free. It's a big fucking deal. Like
Well,
you're kind of
doesn't.
lulled into this sense of like getting a deal when you're not even really getting a deal.
That's true. Well, and just talking about inflation for a second, which now the U.S. being basically the world's reserve currency and being used for trade the world over, right? Obviously has an impact in the global economy.
Until China takes over.
Well, yeah, it might, it could happen. You never know. But it anything that we do that affects the US does to some extent affect every other country on the planet, every other place. And I mean, because even if your particular country doesn't trade in US dollars, the country you're buying things from does as well. So, or does, you know, themselves. So that does actually affect you. And in the US, the Federal Reserve is tasked with creating or maintaining a 2% inflation rate. So their whole MO is basically to make prices go up and make the dollar less valuable, making your wages essentially worth less over time.
Yeah.
And that's their goal. And I mean, obviously, during the coup time, that changed significantly. We were talking like 9 and 10% inflation rates. Maybe it was actually higher than that, but the way they reported it made it look lower. But we can all go to the store and see how much a gallon of milk costs or how much a thing of eggs costs, right?
Inflation, I'll admit inflation on a small scale, like in a vacuum, is a real thing. But for the very reason you just stated, and how what the US does trickles out to the rest of the world, the inflation that we have is entirely concocted. And like there needs to be deflation. Like in an actual free market, there would be this going on rather than, well, inflation only goes up. There's never deflation.
You know, you made a good point. In an actual free market, there would be cycles. There's inflation and deflation, and they act as a signal to the market to either save or spend or invest or whatever, open a business, close a business, hire employees, fire employees, that kind of thing. And those cycles are just part of human nature, essentially. It's just the way we interact, and it changes in technology or innovation or culture. Those things influence all that. And those cycles are natural, and they work themselves out on their own without intervention. But like when your whole entire goal is to create constant inflation, I agree. Deflation would be a huge benefit where, let's say, the purchasing power, you have $1,000 in savings, and the purchasing power of that, I don't know, let's say you could buy a pallet of milk or something. I don't know. But then if you deflated,
drink fast.
Yeah, I know. Well, but if you're a business, I guess. But if you could, like, if you had deflation, a significant amount of deflation to the point where that $1,000 could now purchase 2 pallets of milk. Well, isn't that better? Right? That means you're even like if your wages too, let's say you're making $20 an hour and you're spending half of that to just to live, but then all of a sudden now you only have to spend a quarter of that just to live. Well, hey, you got a lot more free purchasing power there. And yeah, that would be nice. Or even if it just if the Federal Reserve's purpose was to have 0% in any direction, then wages would catch up and we'd be pretty okay for the most part.
Like,
why on earth does anybody think that losing purchasing power is a good thing?
Right. I was just about to say, like, it's ridiculous that like companies aren't just pushing money down to their employees. Like, giving them buying power stimulates the economy as a whole. Even like, I mean, they might even buy products at the company that they work at.
Well, wasn't that Henry Ford?
If you sell something or whatever, but like instead, all they do is pizza parties or stock options. I used to think Probably not such a dumb thought, but it turned out to be. I used to think stock options meant, oh, if you come work here, we'll give you stocks, like give you
Mhm.
stocks. But no, it's like, here's a stock for a little cheaper,
Mhm.
like, and it's like, well, if that's great, but if you're living paycheck to paycheck, your discount does no good for me.
Well, and I think some companies give away stock. There are other companies like what is it? Oh, the grocery chain that oh my god, I can't remember. It's like a co-op, really big. Anyway, but basically the
Trader
employees.
Joe's or
No,
something.
well, maybe Trader Joe's. There's another one that's more of like a full-on grocery store, like Safeway or something, but it isn't Safeway. It's a different one. Um, I can't remember, but the employees.
Hagen or something.
Yeah, well, whatever. But
Yeah.
there is a grocery store out there where the employees are basically all owners of the company.
Mm.
Um,
I believe Costco does that.
that could be too, and
Yeah.
clearly it doesn't severely impact the
Yeah.
company in any way. And I mean that just shows that that is an option. Obviously, that's not going to work everywhere for every situation. Um, but then you have things like franchises and stuff too, which have pros and cons.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, oh man,
And like before you mentioned automation and stuff, like I think people really should change their views, uh, you know, in more of a positive direction on when it comes to automation. It's like, oh no, we'll be losing jobs to the machines and stuff. It's like, well, good, but as long as like the cost to live is achievable by
well,
piecework or a part-time job or whatever, like a job at the
which
corner store or something, then that would be just fine,
well,
like you.
actually now with automation that could be possible because if you can reduce the cost to produce a product, you obviously reduce the ultimate cost to the customer, or you
Yeah,
can.
but you don't, because there's no deflation.
Well, well, but you can overcome inflation by automation, essentially. Wow, that's a good quote. Because you can make what used to well, and here's the thing: we live in a world even people who work at McDonald's right now, there is automation present that back in the day everything was done by hand. You had to learn lots of skills and stuff, and now everything is pretty much measured out and metered out, and you have automatic timers on everything. The drink thing, you just push a button for the size and it does it automatically, like saves you a few seconds there, um, or whatever. And I mean, all that stuff adds up, and the more
Mm.
we do that, the better off it is. Even if I'm an employee working at McDonald's and all I have to do is interact with a customer and push a couple buttons and then hand them their food, my job is really easy at that point.
Yeah.
Instead of running all over the place. No, I like the idea of a big ass machine that just does all the work and out comes the customer's order. And yeah, sure, eventually maybe the face to face aspect might go away, but I doubt it because people like that. That's the human connection. People enjoy having an actual human being. They don't want a robot sitting there at the counter. They want an actual human being that they interact with, somebody who they can say ask questions to. Like you, anytime you call one of these customer service lines from a company, it's the automated system that you are faced with initially, where you have to figure out what button to put. Do I push 6 for this? Is that number 6 or would that be like number 8? And then but when you just want to talk to an actual human being, and so I don't think that line of work will really ever go away.
Yeah.
But in the back end, I think it will. And what you'll be left with too, this is the thing. Sure, burger flipping jobs might go away, but robot repairing technician jobs will be all over the place, which obviously pay way more than a burger flipper. If you can repair a robot or reprogram something or troubleshoot stuff, that's worth a hell of a lot more money than just somebody who's flipping burgers and dispensing fries or something. Uh,
Yeah. So let's look at some of the like myths out there. Like there's not enough houses, there's not enough employees, all this stuff. It's like there's all these unemployed people, and there's all these like places being like, due to COVID, we don't have enough people working for us. And it's like, well, there shouldn't be that disparity. Like you should be like, oh, hey, job opening over here. Oh, I need a job. Look at that. Like when it comes to actually being desperate, you would be able to like make some concessions like, you don't really have the resume we want, but you're a warm body, you can learn.
Mm-hmm.
Here you go, like have a shot at it. And instead what we get is reduced customer service, like shittier customer interactions, shittier prices, shittier delivery times, and the prices just keep going up. They never come down. They might come down a little bit to make it look like they're down, but when you look at a graph, it's always up. This huge housing crash of 2008 or whatever, and it's like, yeah, but look at the price of houses in 2009 and 10, and like they kept going up.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's still a shit ton of empty houses out there.
There are, and I mean that's a very complex topic.
It's a waste. It's a fucking waste.
Well, it really is, and I don't know, man. There's so many. Just your statement there. There's so many things to unpack and talk about. Well, and I remember when I was, say, a teenager, that you could get a job working at McDonald's. You might make, I think at the time, $6 an hour or something like that. And you could work your way up a little bit, become like an assistant manager and make a little bit more. And that was enough, maybe with a roommate, that you could get an apartment, or you could get a really small studio by yourself. Today, even though McDonald's often, there are McDonald's that pay $20 an hour to start, and that isn't even enough. That is not enough to get by, or I'm even just accounting for a place to live, let alone all the other expenses you have to deal with. I mean, your utilities and food and every car stuff, gas, all that other stuff you got to think about. All that stuff is more expensive. Where $6 an hour was a pretty decent wage back then, and now it's not. Even though, well, now the kind of the same scale of wage comparatively is not even close to enough. When I remember too, back then in Tacoma, you could buy a house for $60,000. Yeah, it was a kind of house, but it would be a house nonetheless. You could purchase that for 60 grand. Now,
a super nice house would have been 150.
Yeah, maybe 200 grand for like a really fancy one. But now, those same houses go for $400,000, and rents, of course, parallel that. So if rent used to be, I remember me and my buddy back in high school, maybe right after high school, we were looking to rent a 2-bedroom apartment, and fairly close to the north end. I think it was just into the south end of Tacoma. We found a 2-bedroom apartment that was in a really nice little complex, $550 a month. Yeah. That was a 2-bedroom apartment. Those same ones now are like $2,500 a month, if not more.
Okay, that's another thing we need to talk about is rent, because like I kind of predicted this a long time ago when people were like, you should buy a house, and I was like, yeah, I mean, renting might cost a little more each month, but I'm more modular, like I can move really fast if I need to and stuff like that. But now actually renting is cheaper, and somewhere in the middle, as they were growing closer and closer and that gap was shrinking, I noticed like, oh geez, in order to find a place to live that's affordable, I need to find somebody renting a house who's already paid off their mortgage. They don't need to make extra money. And then I started thinking like, actually, there's plenty of people out there that have a paid off house and they're still raising rent just because of what we talked about earlier. Well, that house over there is $2,500 now. I'm only charging 900. I could get like a lot more money in my pocket for doing the exact same amount of nothing.
Well, and that's good business sense generally.
I don't know
Like,
about that.
well, would you
It's good
would you?
greed sense, but
Oh
it's
no.
not like it's
Would,
not an ethical business move
well,
at
of
all.
course. Well, yeah, and we have some. There are exceptions to that, but most people would not like if I don't know. You just had the opportunity to get paid more money just because other people are like if your boss came to you and said, well, we're paying everybody $60,000 a year and you're only getting 50,000. How about we give you 60,000? Would you turn that down? Yeah, of course not.
But what we're talking about is like, you know, something that's really necessary for survival. Like
Well,
that's like Nestle like going and charging a shit ton of money for water in Africa or whatever. And meanwhile, they built their plant right there and suck all the water out of the ground so that nobody can even get water without paying Nestle. Like
well, one of the problems
dickhead shit like that is what's going
one
on.
of the problems when it comes to housing, and this might be the product of, let's say, COVID and the 2008 crash, that it used to be, say, before all that, there were a lot of individual homeowners. Maybe they had a house or two, and they would rent them out. Our friend's dad had a few of those, just a couple houses, and they'd rent them out. But not so much now. So many of the rentals now are owned by only a handful of companies in a region. And that, while it's not an explicit monopoly, it's getting close to that, where instead of it being just a bunch of people, because if I own a house and I'm renting it out, I can kind of dictate how much I want to charge. So let's say, like your example, I own the house outright and all I have to deal with is property tax and maintenance, right? Yeah, obviously I can still make quite a bit of money charging way less, compared to somebody who bought a house specifically to rent. So they're paying the mortgage and the property tax and the insurance and the maintenance on top of that. So their bar is a lot higher. But there used to be a lot more individual homeowners that would rent their house out,
Right.
compared to now. I mean, you would have big businesses who had apartments. And that was its own thing, but it was in competition with these individual people who would charge very little to rent a house. So it's like, well, obviously we can't charge more for an apartment than a house. That's crazy. Who would pay that? Why would you pay more to live in a small little container along with a bunch of other people when you could pay
and
less?
yet here we are.
And that it's kind of this consolidation of things, which I think it was kind of precipitated by some of those events, because that is kind of the point where I started noticing more and more of these for rent signs that were commercially made and they had a company logo on it versus just one of those things you go to Home Depot and get the for rent sign, the generic one. I don't see any of those anymore, ever.
Well, yeah, I noticed that a long time ago. I used to drive around just looking for those, and then at some point they became more and more rare, and I would not even bother going to the ones that were, had a nice wood post and stuff. And like, no. I know that's bad news. But I'm actually like trying to do a little bit of stuff with real estate now with the hopes that I can kind of ride that profit wave a little bit, but not to like personally gain riches, because I don't really give a shit about that. I just want enough to not have to work, ideally, and live comfortably and have time to write music and do the show. That's all I want.
I think that's what most people, like the individuals who rented, want.
But as we talked about before, why isn't there a fast food company coming out and being like, yeah, here's cheap burgers or whatever? If I can build that up to a level where I would actually have some kind of, like power in the real estate world, where, like I could buy up these properties, I would do everything I could to like turn them into affordable homes, and like not gouge people, because there are tons and tons of homeless people that really shouldn't have to be homeless. Like there needs to be like these stop gaps, like we have to reach out and, you know, give a little bit. I mean, actually give a lot, because there's a huge gap there, and
Well, and
pull
that
these
is
people up, because I think we've discussed this in previous homelessness episodes before, but these people are like wasted potential. They might have skills that the workforce needs, but you know what? They
oftentimes
can't
they
afford
do.
a car, and they can't afford a house to take a shower, and blah
Well,
blah blah.
and it's kind of ends up being sort of a trap when you get
Mm-hmm.
when you're homeless. It's almost impossible to get out. Now, okay, to be
Yeah.
fair, there isn't just one kind of homeless person. It's a very
No, no, no.
complex sort of a lot of different. It's very it's varied in the type of people and the circumstances and things, and certainly a lot of it comes down to addiction and mental health, which of course addiction is a mental health thing, and that you can't just give someone a house and it's instantly fixed. In fact, it might make the situation worse. um, but for the
No,
people
but
who
like you fix enough of it. You fix the ones that are actually just down on their luck,
well, here's the thing.
and you can fix the next problem down the road.
I think the best, well, for one, we need to get rid of a lot of the zoning and the NIMBYism and all these rules and regulations behind buildings so we can build
Yeah.
more, for
Or
one.
or just take
And then,
these empty office buildings and turn them into apartments.
which can get kind of expensive, if you want to have a place where, say, you could take a shower. Office buildings don't typically have showers. So it could get expensive converting that versus even building new might end up being cheaper. Even a tiny house, though, that's an option too. But what you need to do is what you need to do, channeling my inner uh, Dr. Phil. It, what we need to do is stop it before it starts. So people who are living paycheck to paycheck, if they hit a point where something, they have an unforeseen expense and they're like, oh shit, I can't pay rent, or if I pay rent, I can't eat. Well, okay, that's the point where we need a system that can step in and stop it before it happens. It's like preventative healthcare, right? It's a lot cheaper to prevent disease than it is to fix it once it's already happened. And
Right.
and so the same thing with homelessness. When it comes to, let's
Exactly.
just address the non mental health homelessness and just talk
Yeah.
about the economic homelessness. And so it would be so much cheaper if, say, there was a system where you run into a snag, right? And you can call for help and they're like, oh shit, we'll help you fix that. But it's the whole Jesus thing, teach a man to fish, right? You got to be like, okay, well, we'll give you the money to help to balance this out, but in exchange, we're going to try to look at your budgeting and we're going to try to help you so that you can get better at managing money and your expenses, and we're going to figure out ways so that this doesn't happen again. Or maybe instead, like, hey, it turns out you're living in a really expensive place. We found another place that's available over here that's quite a bit cheaper, and so why don't you move into that place and it'll shave off like $500 a month of your expenses. That those kinds of things, like
They already kind of do that, actually.
not
but
enough.
but it's usually when you get to the point of filing for bankruptcy, and by then it's too late.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. You don't. That should never happen. That should never ever happen. Well, obviously it does. It will happen here and there, just like violent crime and stuff. You can never completely eliminate it, but what we can try to do is mitigate it as much as possible. And the easiest way to do that is to nip it in the bud before it grows, before it actually becomes a problem. Because once somebody is actually homeless and they've left and now they can't work and they lost their car, they lost everything they had, and they're living in a tent, well, the expense and time and effort and resources required to get them back into living in a house is way more than simply being like, hey, we're going to send someone over. Yep, we're writing you a check for $1,200 to cover the difference. And we're going to sit down with you and look at all of your finances, take a couple hours, go through things. We actually have classes. You could take a class and talk with an expert, somebody who knows how to budget and manage money. And maybe there's some opportunities or options and stuff like that. That's the thing we should do. Okay, now I don't want to leave behind the people who are already homeless because, okay, we got to tackle that. But we can't just keep tackling the people. Like, let's consider it like a disease, right? You can't just keep treating people who already have these advanced diseases when there's a simple solution to stop that disease from happening in the first place. Like, hey, you just do these couple of things or take this thing or take this test or whatever, and we can get it before it becomes an expensive problem.
The problem with that, at least in the US, is that they're priced out of that as even being an option. You know, like even before your paycheck to paycheck, that's something that's like a real luxury. Like you would really have to put away for that. Even if you have health insurance, it's only going to cover like 12 talks with a therapist in a year or something, which is like not enough at all.
Well, and that's a whole different thing than going into mental health and how people are so dismissive of that, which it like mental health is kind of at the core of so many problems in society, societal problems.
Remember one of our first episodes when we interviewed one of the lucky few former homeless men that managed to get out of that, and not into the lap of luxury by any means, but
at least like stabilized.
Yeah, he confirmed that like it's kind of a myth, let's say, that mental illness is that rampant, or even drug abuse is that rampant in the homeless community. Like those are the ones you notice, of course. Like a lot of people are just trying not to look at these homeless people, but the ones that are like and like getting in their face, you notice those ones.
Well, and I think if you look, and because I've seen so many, I pay attention to the homeless population in Tacoma. The ones that are in the shelters are probably more just like people that are down on their luck. But the ones that you see on the streets certainly have mental health issues and addiction issues for sure, which, that again, what you're correct in that those are the things that you see. And then that's the assumption is that, and I would probably say it's maybe half and half ish, because we don't have a whole lot of shelter space here, which is unfortunate. But it doesn't matter. The point is that the solution, there's not a magic bullet. There's not a one size fits all. Oh, just do these 5 tricks and you'll solve homelessness. No, it is a complex issue, very complex, and requires a multi-pronged approach to address all the different aspects of things. I'm not really sure what kind of prioritization for all of the different things are, but there are many of them that need to be done. And a lot of them are going to be hard pills to swallow for the general public. Like we have to have a YIMBY attitude where yes in my backyard instead of NIMBY.
Yes in my backyard.
The NIMBY approach, like not in my backyard. That's the people who don't want. I want to solve homelessness, but no, don't put a homeless shelter near my house. No, that'll change my property values and blah blah blah. We need to. That's one of the biggest things that I think we got to address it in that way. And there's a lot of other things too. There's programs that we have that are ineffectual that need to go away. We need to take a different approach to manage things. And I mean, it goes all the way back to the heart of the economy. Well, the government economy, that is the US dollar and generating inflation intentionally. That's a big thing. And all these rules and regulations around building more stuff and where it can be built and what it has to look like. And look, if we are to assume that housing, that shelter is such an important thing, and in the rules of three, that's one of the first things that you need to consider before water, before food. Shelter is first, primary. So if we're to assume that that is such a big deal, then we have to change the way we think about things and the way we do things, and can't just throw money at it, because it's not a matter of money. It's a matter of procedure and attitude and community involvement too. That's a huge factor. Like, hey, these homeless people living around here on the streets, they're people, they're part of your community. They're human beings with rights that human beings have, and lives, and they've had their own experiences, and they deserve better than that.
So here's the thing. It is as easy as do these 5 magic tricks. You know, there is magic bullets to this. It just costs money. And the harder pill to swallow, I think, is that the people that could sink the money into making that happen almost overnight aren't willing to do it because greed.
Okay, but like, we've spent billions of dollars, tens of billions, I mean, depending across different states and things, maybe hundreds of billions of dollars a year, just throwing it at that problem. Obviously, it is not a matter of money at that point. It's a matter of what we do with that money. That we don't need more money. We have more than enough between charities and
don't pay the police to move a homeless camp to another neighborhood. You're just sweeping the problem around, wasting money.
Well, and
of course you have to spend the money correctly, but I'm just saying that, like, even if you diverted all the money that we currently spend on it, you would still need some more. You would also need, like, not just paper money being thrown at things, but also like empty buildings being donated, food being donated, labor being donated. You know, like you're talking about, the community has to pay something out too.
Well, whether it be financial or in just your own personal time, donating your own resources. Hey, I got a bunch of extra coats or something, which I've done many times for homeless people, because I have a bunch of stuff, and I just like, hey, you need a coat? Here you go.
But if you don't want to get off your ass and help the homeless, pay more tax. It's okay. You won't die. Like, you won't die. They might die.
Now here's where you and I disagree, because I don't think it's a matter of money. I mean, obviously money and resources do come into play.
Yeah, money buys the resource.
Well, you know, why not?
It works in almost every other goddamn country except the US. And you can't tell me it's just a culture thing or a population thing. That's bullshit. It's greed. It is 100% comes down to greed.
I'm gonna say I somewhat disagree on that regard. That it's that simple. That it's just simply greed is why people are homeless. That's an oversimplification of things, and that, oh, we just need more money. You give more money and we'll solve it. No, okay.
The US has super low tax rates, and they bitch the most about tax. Like, oh my God, don't raise my tax. You know,
but we know that it's not a matter of how much money is spent on a thing. It's a matter of how it's spent and where it's spent and what is done. You can't just give money to homelessness and expect that it's going to be used wisely, because, again, greed. People pocket that money for themselves. They pay their cronies. They waste time doing nothing, getting their fat paycheck, you know, sitting on their butt doing nothing as like a director of homelessness outreach or something. It's not as simple as that. And so, and all these things are tackling the people who are already at the late stages of a disease. And in using the medical analogy, what we need to do is begin at the beginning. Focus our energy on getting rid of inflation. Focus our energy on making it easier and reducing restrictions on housing, building housing. We need to get rid of property tax or minimize it so that, I mean, that's an easy thing, right? You don't have to do anything to reduce costs like that. It's the government that are just arbitrarily charging you money for an arbitrary assessment of your property compared to other properties. Hey, why don't we get rid of that for a while? Just for a while and see what happens. Why don't we go to the Federal Reserve? Well, actually, why don't we shut down the Federal Reserve and go back to Treasury, the Treasury managing money, even though I'm still skeptical of that, but it was better.
I mean, the government is greedy too. You know, like
you bet.
Like, of course, the government is like at the root of all these problems because like there's no reason that people in government should be rich, but they all are.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like that's
well. So wrong. Then why more taxes? Why give government even more weight in that regard? Why don't we be?
Why? Okay, I'll concede you have to change the government too,
which is a cultural shift, and there's many things that require that too. When it comes to homelessness, mental health, and all that stuff, we need a paradigm shift in the way we perceive things, and not look to the government, the great God of the government, to help me in my hour of need. No, we're human beings on this planet together, and we need to band together and fix it ourselves. Even if we're still paying taxes, I don't care. Yeah, fine. It's extortion. I'll pay taxes, but even that aside, I'm going to do my own things that I think is going to help the community. And some of that is just changing hearts and minds, proposing ideas, and challenging well-established thought patterns and things like that. I think we need more and more of that. We need like a grassroots kind of thing if we're ever going to solve this. And we need to push back when, say, a church tries to build a tiny house community for the homeless and the government puts their big jackboot down and squishes it. No, we need to just storm City Hall and be like, hey, let them build it. Because that goes a long way.
Well, here in Germany, you'll walk down the neighborhood and all of a sudden there's a corner store. It's like it used to be back in the 80s and stuff. Mm-hmm. You know, like the zoning here seems to be pretty relaxed. And a lot of that is just because there's not much room to work with here. It's a small country, a very old country, and the roads, you know, from way back in the day are narrow and stuff. So it's like, you know, maybe that all worked out as an act of necessity. But another reason why the government doesn't get so fucking out of control is there's more than two parties, you know, like, and really like the US has to really get more, like not just a third party, which is just either a Republican or a Democrat putting on sheep's clothing each and every time. You know, like we need actual different ideas to choose from, and they all need to have an equal shot at, you know, taking the reins and trying something different.
Well, as an anarchist, I don't believe the solution is government at all. In fact, that's the source of all of our woes. The community,
just because the way it stands now is the source of all the problems doesn't mean that all governments are the source of the problem. They can actually help fix them.
Well, no, this is true, and even in partisan politics, sometimes every once in a while there's a decent idea that actually works. But I think ultimately we should be responsible to each other. That me as a human being on Earth, I should be doing my best to improve the lives of other humans in whatever way I can. I think everybody has something they can contribute, whatever it is. And that's a culture shift that we need to happen. Well, and talking about that too, like, you know, in Germany and there's other countries, European countries that have stores, like a kind of a mixed use region where there's stores and shops and apartments and houses and stuff. That is a cultural difference. Here in the US, somehow, I think probably starting after like World War II, things started shifting culturally to like this NIMBY thing where, I gotta have my lawn and everything's got to be cookie cutter and it's got to be perfect. And so people pressured local governments to eliminate those kinds of things that we want zoning. We don't want a shop in this neighborhood because that's kind of weird. I don't want to have like a store next door, like a whatever, or a gas station on the corner or something, even though it's stupid because it's more convenient for the people living in the area. Wouldn't it? Like, I love the fact that I have two gas stations right near my house. I have a convenience store that has all kinds of stuff, and I have a pizza place. Like, right there, I can walk across the street. I can get a pizza. I can get gas if I need. I can get food or whatever. Just I need some batteries. It's right there. It's great, even though it's a little annoying at times with the propane. But
if you need propane though, like
yeah, but if you don't like that, then just go form an HOA and restrict that.
Right. And well, okay, so in fairness, having zones for like commerce and industry do have like actual benefits and stuff, like it helps the commerce itself overall to be near other commerce. It helps contain pollution to have factories in one area that nobody's living near. I totally agree with that. I don't want a factory next door.
Okay, well, okay. So this is a topic I get. I don't know if anybody can tell, but I'm fired up about this because I'm very passionate about it. All the stuff we've been talking about. So now you don't need to specify zoning for that to be the case.
Right.
Industry.
No, I know what you mean.
Yeah. So it'll happen organically. It doesn't make sense to buy up a bunch of really expensive properties in a like a I don't know, just a housing area where it's all houses, and tear it all down and build a giant factory when, well, there's all this unused land over here, and there's also a train system that goes through, there's rail, there's like a port and a freeway that you're right near the freeway. That's the place you want to build, and that's kind of what really just happens, and that's what would happen. So, and if you want to live in a world where you don't have any chance of that,
in a world,
yeah. Oh God, I miss that guy. If you want to live in a world like a community where you don't have any chance of that, where everything is just like you want and it's as idyllic as you believe it is, then again, HOA. You contractually agree when you buy property that you're going to participate in the HOA system, and that could take any form. Really, it doesn't have to be bad or crazy or authoritarian. It could be really simple. It could just be like, hey, we want this money. You're going to pay your dues, and we're going to maintain roads. We're going to build a school. We're going to build a library. There's going to be a nice park that we're going to maintain. Some people would love that. Or maybe it becomes more restrictive. Okay, everybody has to follow these rules. You can't have your trash cans out. You have to have your lawn manicured. Your house has to be one of these colors or something like that. And
that's usually what it is.
yeah, it's very nitpicky. But there are a lot of people who want that, and they love it. And fine, you want to live like that? Live like that over there. Just don't force me to live like that, because I want to live in a progressive culture that just expands and changes and adapts and grows and is technologically advanced. And yeah, that's what I want. But that's the thing. Everybody's a little bit different.
Man. All this from an ultimate cheeseburger.
I know. Oh man. Yeah. But I mean, we are kind of the thing is, it's going to take, it isn't going to take voting. It's not going to take more taxes. It's not going to take politicians doing things and stuff. It's going to take actual work, thought. We're going to have to seriously analyze everything if we want to change things for the better. And it's going to take some intelligence and wisdom and consideration. And there's no one way that's going to work. And you can, it's especially in the US, because like, you're saying, oh, the cross-cultural comparison and stuff. Well, I mean, it sort of applies, but but it's different when you have a smaller region that's more homogenous versus the US, which is like Babylon 5, a big giant Babylon 5. It There is no one school of thought. There's no one need across the country. There's all kinds of different mini cultures essentially that exist there, and they're different, totally different environments too. Like
there isn't just one school of thought here in Germany. There's several political parties vying for, like saying, "Hey, we should try it this way instead." Because
fine.
There are things that aren't perfect, but like
I wouldn't. I don't like the idea of deferring to politics as a solution. It comes down to us as human beings working on solutions and fixing the political system or diminishing it, or building up what works and tearing down what doesn't. That's what we need to do.
So the government is like a lawnmower. You could get all of your neighbors to come over with tweezers and help you pluck the lawn every Sunday and spend 12 hours doing it, and everybody wastes their entire day on that. Or you could, like all chip in and share a lawnmower and get the job done in like an hour. It's the whole being greater than the sum of its parts. It's like seeing the big picture and utilizing a tool that can be used for good.
But
I
would argue,
like all tools, they can also and often do get used for nefarious purposes.
Well, and that comes down to the human element, which is always present, no matter what you do. I just don't like the idea of a monolith.
Well, that's why AI needs to be in charge.
That makes a lot more sense. Yeah, I just don't like the idea of a monolithic monopoly, basically being the only decision maker, essentially, and being a lawnmower that, it's great when you're mowing the lawn, but if you just let that lawnmower roll forward, it's going to cut the flowers. It's indiscriminately going to just do its thing because it doesn't have any kind of sense about what it's doing. It's a fucking lawnmower. And so I don't know. Like me, I'm more community driven. I think human beings work well together when we have a common goal, and even with different schools of thought and viewpoints and things like that, we can figure things out.
How does this Freedom of Information Act work? Could you actually request kind of like transparency on spending for, let's say, anything except the military? Because then they're going to be like redacted. But there's no reason to redact anything about what you're spending on filling potholes. Like just get all the information out to the public about exactly what their tax money is doing. If they're interested and they want to read it, there it is. Boom, right there, and get people pissed off.
I think that's a really good idea, honestly. A FOIA request is something you could certainly do. It does take way more time than it's legally supposed to take. It could take months, years, sometimes to get back all the stuff you want. And though everybody can submit a FOIA request, I'd say do it carefully because it does cost resources to get that information. Somebody has to go and collect all that stuff, and don't just indiscriminately use that tool. Oh man.
No, but I mean, it should be like like a community effort too. Maybe
something we were going to talk about too. Wages. It's also important to look at how much money a lot of these politicians and bureaucrats are making, who are, by the way, claiming they're doing a thing, right? Like especially politicians, when they're running for a particular office, they'll say, I'm going to do this and this and that. And of course, we all know they defer to the corporate interests and other things, their own self-serving interests. But take a look at how much these people are getting paid for doing really nothing that we want them to do. They're obviously not solving any problems if they keep telling us that every time, hey, I'm going to fix this problem, I'm going to fix that problem. Okay, well, when did you fix it? When has any politician ever fixed anything? I mean, the only time I can think of is like they make it worse.
Yeah.
And then,
well, like one thing that should happen is these federal pensions need to drastically change, and not go away, because everybody else is entitled to Social Security, so ought to be government employees. But the whole point of being a government employee is hopefully to be as neutral as possible, and neutral equates to average. So they should just get whatever the average going rate for Social Security retirement is. Whatever that average is, that's going to be their pension. Guess how much they would then invest in improving Social Security pensions?
Well, yes, you are correct. So, and not
like everybody would benefit then. It's like you said with the A/B button thing. Like people are constantly hitting the B button.
Yeah. Well, and that's something, they might be less inclined to siphon off Social Security resources for pet projects like they've been doing for the last multiple decades. And they wonder, well, wait a minute, why is Social Security insolvent? Like I'm not counting on that.
And inflation also negatively impacts that in a huge way.
Yeah, exactly. The only people I know of in the US that get pensions are government employees. No one else. It used to be if you worked for a big company, manufacturing company, say you worked for Ford back in the day when Ford was in Detroit. You work there for your 30, 40 years or whatever, you retire, you get a pension from Ford. They would pay you a pension. That doesn't happen anymore. Nobody gets a pension except for public sector people. Like what gives? Wait, why am I paying for your pension when I will never get one unless I work for the government?
My mom had a pension. She worked at the newspaper. She worked until 5 years before her death. Never made over $50,000 a year. Still had a pension. It wasn't like they weren't rich or anything, but the way it worked, actually, like with the pension and Social Security, my mom began making more money retired than she did working. Still, like, not a whole lot more, but so pensions were a good idea when they still existed, and they would be a retainment tool. I'm going to keep working here and investing in my future and stuff like that. And you take away all these incentives, and then you wonder why people don't want to work at your company anymore. Like, I mean, it's not so hard. I see tons of these political comics about that are frankly quite hilarious, because it's like, like this, CEO being like, oh, nobody wants pizza parties anymore, and they say they don't want to work, and oh no, and he's like drying his tears with money, and like, and it's like, like that's kind of the state of the world.
Well, and one has to ask the question of, let's go back to the 50s when a lot of big companies had pensions and all made plenty of money. Everybody was doing pretty well. Well, what changed? I guess one could say then
taxes got cut, for one thing.
Well, the advent of Social Security gave everybody an excuse to say, oh, well, we don't need that anymore because you got Social Security. It's kind of like when I worked at Domino's, right? The delivery fee, I would go and deliver a pizza to somebody driving across town, and they'd be like, well, not going to give you a tip because I've already tipped you with the delivery fee. And I'm thinking, I see like 25 cents of that. Well, that's not a tip. It's right. There's a reason why it's a company insurance and stuff like that. But like people they thought that all that money went to me when almost none of it did. And yeah, man.
Yeah, it's like maybe we should wrap up, but real quick, one thing came to mind. Um, Here in Germany, the price you see is the price you pay at the register. Like
which is actually common around most of the world, actually.
yeah, like they are transparent about what you're paying. They're not trying to hide the tax. It's there.
Mm-hmm.
It's just factored into the price, and it works. Like it's easy to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like that couldn't be adopted by the United States, but
No,
instead they opt instead for the whole like 99 cent psychological trick.
well, yeah, I
Like
was gonna say that's why the yeah 10.99 or whatever instead of just saying $11. Uh,
right.
well, and there are a few places in the U.S. that I've been to that the whole store is tax included. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
even sure if that's a thing that's some because why do so many people do it, or what most companies and stores and stuff do it. Maybe there's some kind of regulatory thing that, well, if you do that, who knows? But it may not be as simple as, well, everybody's colluding to not include tax to trick the customer or something. There could be some other explanation for that. I always try to look at things that way. That there
Well,
might be an
yeah, I
alternative
mean,
explanation.
I I I think what it is, because I remember when we owned a business, I think we even talked about trying to do that, but we couldn't think of a way to make it easy because we couldn't seem to escape the idea of being like, well, the service has to cost this much, like a nice even number, and then the tax on top of that should also come out to a nice even number so it looks pretty on the price tag or whatever. And you can't make those two jive. You have to work backwards. You have to say,
Yeah.
okay, this is the price that looks appealing and still covers costs, and the tax included, blah blah blah, and then whatever's left over is our margin, and that's what we work with. It
And
doesn't
it
have to
didn't.
be a pretty number because you're the one seeing.
Yeah,
Like
and it didn't help matters that we also, like, the big chunk of what we did was field work. So there's
mm,
different sales tax rates everywhere you go. I think, remember Kent, like half of Kent is one rate and the other half on the other side of a street is a different rate.
yeah.
Like, it gets confusing because, yeah, you're expected to charge the customer the local tax rate, even though, yeah, it's, oh, man.
I mean, okay, so that is also a thing here. Like, well, even I think we weren't supposed to charge tax on labor, which I think is just generally across the board like a thing. But when it comes to like service people coming out, like obviously like they come with a part and stuff, and they have to fill out their little invoice thing and calculate the tax for that, but they like show it to you and like make sure you agree
Mhm.
with like the total before anything happens, like whereas here it's just kind of like, yeah, this is what you owe, tough shit, like because the tax just kind of like, people don't see it coming, like it's wired into our brains to see a price and think that's what we're paying, you know
Mhm.
and then this additional bit comes on the end, and
Unless
yeah,
you reprogram yourself like I've done to just factor that in as I'm
right,
mentally tabulating what I'm picking up.
yeah, I try to do that too, but it's difficult math, like
Well, you can estimate. I mean, you can just go into the ballpark. Just if you add
mhm.
10% or something, or round up to the 50-cent mark or whatever, you pretty much account for that. And then sometimes you're pleasantly surprised when you get to the checkout and the
Yeah,
price is lower than what you thought it was going to be. That's kind
yeah.
of good. Um, yeah. Oh man, there's so many angles we could go on here, but I guess I don't know.
Staying frugal is important too. Like there's
Yeah.
thinking about there's people that probably have no idea what we're talking about when we say like figuring out what price, like when you have a limited amount of money and you go to the grocery store for food, you're like, okay, I can only afford $100 of food, so I have to count as I put things in the cart,
Mhm.
you know, and try to figure out exactly what it's going to be. And if you're a little bit off, you have this awkward situation where you're like, I guess put the toilet paper back.
Mhm. Well, we had a friend I remember who was always overdrafting because he would look at his account balance, not factoring in the fact that there was a reoccurring bill that was coming up, and he'd spend down to almost zero,
Yeah.
and then, oopsie, my cell phone bill posted, and now I've overdrafted, and then fees and having to kind of deal with all that and stuff. It budgeting is
Yeah.
kind of a lost art these days.
Yeah. Like I even though I budget, I still hate recurring fees because it is easy for them to slip past you, even if
Oh,
it's written down somewhere or you have a
mhm.
reminder. Your reminder goes off and you get distracted, you forget, like
Absolutely. And that's where, well, we had the lightning strikes twice that kind of led to this episode. Your topic involved subscription services.
mhm.
Um, and that's something that, people need to reduce those. You don't necessarily need to
Yeah.
subscribe to, you don't need to have super high speed internet necessarily. If you're a Twitch streamer and you're making money and that's your job, yeah, you probably want that premium internet package. But if you're just kind of casually using it, you don't need it. You don't need cable. Honestly, I haven't had cable in like 20 years and I don't miss it at all. I've got YouTube, there's Rumble, there's a bunch of other different places where you can find endless things to watch that are way more interesting. Like, remember Discovery Channel, right? It used to have sciencey things and stuff and interesting stuff about the world and technology, and then it devolved into the deadliest catch and the Orange County choppers or whatever, that kind of thing. Like, History Channel used to have history, and then maybe it had kind of the same sort of thing. I don't remember which one has which, but they kind of
It all
just,
became about aliens.
oh yeah, yeah, ancient aliens. Yep.
Yeah.
How is that history? I don't get it. But
I,
okay, why pay for that?
yeah, I'm going to give people a little life hack to deal with all these subscriptions and stuff. Anytime I run into a situation where I have to get some kind of subscription thing, I immediately put a reminder in my calendar on my phone, say, cancel such and such with a question mark, just to remind myself, like, am I still using this? Should I get rid of it? Because otherwise, then you get an email like 2 days later, like, thanks for your payment. They don't warn you. Even when you sign up or check a box saying, please warn me, they're like, just to warn you, we charged you 2 days ago. Thank you.
Yeah, it's very important to stack up your expenses in advance and keep track of all that stuff, even the little stuff. A $4 charge for some service or something, that those add up, and maybe you don't need them, like you're saying. The minimalism movement, just cleaning your house, getting rid of stuff that you don't use or that isn't really worth having, taking up space. And why would you pay for something taking up your financial resources if you don't really use it or it doesn't bring you joy or something?
And set those reminders a few days ahead, because sometimes it's not so easy to cancel these things and you have to call several times or wait for a manager to call you back.
Yes, you're very correct. And you know what? There's a absolutely awesome solution to that. There are services that essentially generate a debit card for you that's tied to your account, but only like it basically only works one way. And so for each service, you can generate a special card for that service. And if you want to cancel it, you just turn that off. And well, there you go. And yeah, the service costs a little bit extra, but like it's kind of worth it because, like you said, trying to cancel, holy shit. And if you're dealing with Comcast or something, oh my God, it's hours and hours and hours of time. And sometimes you've got to sign a bunch of paperwork and stuff. They sure took your money fast, but trying to not take your money, it's like pulling teeth.
Yeah.
And I would recommend if somebody is addicted to signing up for services, that's a great way to go because you could get out of it very, very easily.
I've often wished, like, oh man, maybe I just cancel my debit card. Like,
uh-huh.
that
Yeah.
would be a good, yeah.
Well, and if everything is tied to one card, then that's very hard. Sure, you could cancel it, but now the ones you do want to keep around, you have to contact them and say, "Oh, I have a new number and this and that." So much easier to deal with one of those services that it's like, oh yeah, you could just click a button and poof, there goes that bill is gone now. They're going to send you emails and maybe phone calls and whatnot, but whatever, just ignore it.
Someday they're going to find out a way to use bureaucracy to prevent that from working anymore. But
yeah,
until that day, utilize it, people.
Yep. Well, and I'd highly recommend if you look at people's savings. I mean, yeah, it used to be back in the day. I remember when I had my first savings account, I think I had like a 4 or 5% interest rate. So I made a decent amount of money just having money sitting in the bank. And now it's like 0.3% or something less than that even. But having a little bit of a cushion, and you could go with the richest man in Babylon technique and take 10% off of every paycheck and put it aside and then make it do work. Or even if you don't make it do work, just having a little bit for those unforeseen oopsie moments when you spent all the money on things and then there's, oh crap, that reminder dinged and shit, I need to pay $100 for this and I don't have $100. Well, if you had a little bit in savings, you can divert that to cover that expense. You don't need a whole lot. I would highly recommend having at least, the goal should be having at least a couple of months of expenses and savings just sitting there, just in case that you don't touch. And because, well, if you lose your job or some weird expense comes up that you didn't expect, then at least you have that to be able to cover those expenses or some of it. It's totally worth it. And the thing is, I've been practicing that for a while. And the thing is, you think, well, if I take 10% of my paycheck, like I'm already kind of on the edge.
Right.
You would think that you wouldn't have, you'd be like, I'm even more on the edge now. But actually, no, somehow you're kind of not. It's just because it's I guess
tried several times to get out of that paycheck hole and do that very thing. And you end up relying on the savings often enough where you can't actually save anything. It oftentimes requires, unless you're super lucky, some kind of windfall that you can use as like, kind of a life ring to get you to that point and be like, okay, now I've got like a fair amount extra. Now I put away 3 months or 6 months of living expenses, maybe in a high yield account. So it is getting 4 or 5%, and then feel safe for a change, but you can't really, especially now with the state of inflation and the wages being stagnant and everything, and rents going up and food going up and gas going up,
you may not
be remote jobs and stuff. Like everything is contributing towards diminishing your savings.
This is true. And your savings, obviously, with inflation constantly occurring, it will decrease in purchasing power over time. But that's where you can add a little bit to it and create that cushion. And even, okay, maybe you're so on the edge that you're eating top ramen and that's all you ever eat. And you basically, the only service you have is utilities and a cell phone, or maybe internet. But at that point, yeah, putting aside a little bit is challenging, if not impossible. But if you're not that far to the edge, then there's always ways. Maybe, like I said, eat some top ramen one day instead of going and getting fast food, which is a luxury for a lot of people, as we were saying. Just consider maybe, oh yeah, I'm gonna make some something at home or whatever. Just try to cut costs to account for putting a little bit aside. It doesn't have to even be 10%. It could be 1%. Maybe this month you only put aside $20, but it's $20 more than you had before in that account. And just consider that thing like a child that you're raising. You don't want that child getting smaller, right?
Yeah. And yeah, like, so before I got married, I was living alone, and I came to find that even though fast food prices had gone up, it was actually kind of cheaper to eat out than to buy all the necessary foodstuffs in order to cook at home. And then before I can use it all, it goes bad and I'm throwing it away. So it's like, maybe at the moment I'm not spending all that much money, but I'm effectively throwing a good chunk of that money away.
That's true. That only the buying fresh ingredients to make food only works when you have more people to feed. Because if you buy
invite friends over, invite friends over.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a good point.
I would do that. I would I was like, oh, I want to cook something, but like I'm just me. So I would have a friend over and cook for both of us or something.
Actually, if everybody did that, that could be a huge solution. Like, hey, this one time you're cooking for a couple of friends, and the other time you're thinking, oh man, I don't want to spend like $15 going and getting some food, but your friend calls you up or texts you and it's like, hey, I'm having a barbecue. You want to come over and just have some food? Oh, hey, there's dinner taken care of for the day. Like that would level that out if everybody did that. Another option too, and this is something I've been kind of getting more and more into, is freeze-dried meals, which used to be kind of, I saw them as sort of expensive, but that was back in the day when I could go to Taco Bell and spend $5 and have food and then some. I'd have leftovers for the next day. Now, of course, you buy just enough and it's like $12, $13, $15 or something. But a freeze-dried meal, a lot of those are extremely healthy, full of all kinds of nice ingredients. And you could get them for like $10 or $11 or even less if you're willing to fork out the dough to buy in bulk. Even the survival things, those big buckets that have all the stuff in them, seem expensive, except they're actually not when you break down individual components and you have a variety of meals and stuff. And there's a lot of people who are like, freeze dry, that's garbage. It's like, you haven't tried modern day freeze dried food. It is delicious. There is some great stuff there, and it keeps for a long time. Like, hey, if you have the opportunity to eat somewhere else, you don't have to worry about all the celery and carrots and whatnot that you bought going bad, because you don't have it. It's freeze dried. It'll last 30 years.
Right. Well, I mean, people get all these old wives' tales in their heads about food, and they think, oh, if it's frozen, it's not healthy anymore.
No, it's actually more healthy in some cases.
Yeah, but I mean, like, these are the same people that will then like throw all these vegetables in a pot of water and boil all the nutrients out and then dump the water down the drain.
Yep.
Eat soggy vegetables, less minerals and stuff.
I am all about fresh vegetables. There are very few that I enjoy cooked. It's the opposite of when I was a kid. I hated fresh stuff. I always had to have things cooked, and now it's the opposite. And partially because of that, and I kind of conditioned myself to really appreciate the flavor of fresh vegetables, which is amazing when you get used to it. You can also, here's another option too in reducing food costs. It's like, if you have a little bit of space, a little bit of land, you can grow your own food. There are people even in apartments that they use the balcony and they put the little those boxes with dirt in them out there,
trellis or whatever.
Yeah, and you can grow. There's hanging things. You could, all kinds of different options. There's even indoor ones, that these crazy contraptions that are what do they call it? Hydroponic growing systems that yeah, it seems expensive at first, but then you could put it in a closet in your apartment and have a whole ton of fresh food that's growing in there. They light themselves, water themselves, adjust everything. And it's like, yeah, a pack of seeds, it's like 50 cents. And you could grow so much food from that one pack of seeds. And yeah, it takes time, but that's an option. I mean, we got to get clever. That, like, okay, the way I look at it, it's like, okay, we can't really necessarily individually, we can't change the way things are. We have to pretty much kind of just accept, okay, this is the way things are. Okay, I live in North Korea. Me as one person cannot change that. Uh, I mean, you could try, but better to adapt and figure out solutions, that clever solutions, and share them with other people. Certainly that's really the way to change things is information sharing and community work, I think.
Yeah.
Man, I had a thought there in tangent, but whatever. I think we've rambled on long enough, haven't we?
Yeah. Bladder is full.
Oh man. Well, I'm sure there will be a lot of thoughts that people have on this subject, and I welcome them all, different ideas, because I mean, we don't have all the answers. No one person has all the answers. If they claim to, they're either trying to sell you something or to control you. So keep that in mind.
Yeah. Huh. You know what song we should pull out? Haven't used in a while is "Gross Domestic Squalor."
Oh yeah, idea. No, that might be queuing up right now. You never
I
know.
think it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for deep sink diving into fast food and inflation and lack of deflation and
Budgeting,
wage transparency, and
yeah,
all kinds of economy related things in this ever speeding toward dystopia kind of roller coaster that we're all riding on.
Well, you can either scream in terror or enjoy the ride.
Save your money, don't be late. Work for someone that you